Welcome. So this is going to be a really gentle kind of re-entry to mobility. And so you don't need any props. You could do it on rug or a yoga mat. I generally just do this on a rug, super easy, don't need much. And we're going to start on our backs. So you're going to lay down on your back, knees bent, feet stepped onto the floor. And the first thing that you'll do is reach your arms up to the ceiling. You can grab your right hand around your left wrist, or if your hands can interlace your fingers and invert without too much wrist discomfort, you can do that. I tend to go for my right hand around my left wrist. You're just going to reach your head, not your head, your arms up and over your head until they come towards the floor. They might even be able to be on the floor, right? And so as you reach your arms towards the floor, see if you can press the shoulders towards the ears, right? So the thing that most people tell you not to do. You're going to reach your shoulders toward your ears with the intention of pulling your rib cage away from your pelvis, effectively lengthening the waist. And then just take a moment to notice if your lower back is arching pretty substantially off the ground, if it's pressing deeply into the ground, almost like you're tucking your pelvis under, or if it's sort of in that neutral space in between the two. And what we're really aiming for is to maintain the pelvis in neutral so that we're not arching or rounding the back as we move through this first little mobility exercise. And so once you've got your spine in neutral, and you may want to tuck your pelvis and arch your pelvis and then arch your back to find that center point. Feel a little bit of engagement of your abdomen pulling up away from your pelvic rim, so two hip points and a pubic bone. And then against that lift of kind of the guts, so to speak, go ahead and slide your right leg down onto the floor. Now, as you slide your right leg down onto the floor, the tendency is for that to pull your lower back off the ground and your pelvis will come into a back bend effectively. So that's why pulling that tissue up away from your pelvic rim is so important. So you're reaching the heel of your right foot away from your hip socket. You're lifting the guts away from your pelvis, almost as if you could like scoop them out of your pelvis. And then your arms are still reaching overhead. And so you're trying to find as much length as you can between the right heel and the arms. And then just take a couple of breaths there and see how you could get more space, right? And so again, we're not arching the back, it's still in neutral. And we're effectively trying to sort of like hollow out, if it was possible, the hip socket. It's not possible, right? Because it's a bony structure. But what if you could get that to separate and hollow out a little bit? And just hold that for a couple of breaths. And then when you're ready, bring your right foot back onto the ground. If you had your right hand around your left wrist, just switch hands so that you've got the opposite pull. And then go ahead, slide your left leg down. So same idea. So you've got left foot pulling away from your hip socket with the toes flexed back so you can kind of reach out through your heel. Against the pull of your left leg down and out of the hip socket, you're scooping the guts up and out of the pelvis. And that is an abdominal contraction, but what we're not doing is sucking the navel back to the spine. So it's really a sense of lifting out of the pelvis as opposed to pushing the abs down to the floor, if that makes sense. And then continue reaching the arms up and away, trying to, again, scoop out the left hip. And as you're doing this, you might feel a little bit of a psoas stretch if you're familiar with what that feels like. Um, you might just feel a really big lengthening. You might also feel a little bit of ability to kind of wiggle the ribs up a little bit higher away from your pelvis as you take that, third, fourth, fifth breath here. And then go ahead, release that. Bring your left foot back down onto the ground. You can release the arms into cactus. So cactus is the elbows bent 90 degrees and the shoulders at 90 degrees. So you're very in a very squared off position. And then we're going to shift your hips to the right an inch or two and let your knees fall to the left. So you're taking a twist. Now, as you come into this twist, especially if you're feeling a little sticky in the spine, I tend to like to put my left hand on the top leg, which is your right leg, if your knees are going to the left. And then as you ground your legs down onto the floor, actively twist your chest in opposition towards the right side. If you are someone who has a lot of popping and clicking in their spine, that might do it, right? But we want to be really gentle with this. We're not looking to crack anything. If it happens, it happens. But we're really looking to kind of rotate at the spine as opposed to rotate at the hip, right? So just take a couple of breaths right there. Your right arm may or may not be on the floor. You're trying to get your right arm on the floor as best you can, right? But everybody's got a little bit different mobility ability. And then go ahead, release your left hand back to cactus. You're going to bring your knees up to the ceiling. Shift your hips a little bit through center over to the left. Let your knees fall to the right. This time, right hand goes on top of the left thigh. And then you're actively pulling your chest, your sternum, or your breastbone away from your knees. And so this kind of twist can be passive. I find a really nice activity in this twist to really try and get the spine to rotate as opposed to just hang off the shoulders. And so that can be great if you can ground your legs down, thinking about reaching the or twisting the chest away from the knees, which should help let the left shoulder descend towards the floor, even if it doesn't quite get there. And then you breathe for a few moments. Okay. And then from here, we're going to come on to hands and knees. So go up, bring your left hand over to the right side and just turn right up. Bring the knees onto the ground and you're just kind of pop into a hands and knees position. If you've got wrist stuff, walk your hands a step forward. If you don't, then you can keep your hands right underneath your shoulders. And then we're going to come into some cats and some cows. So as you inhale, go ahead, arch your back, look forward, and see if you can feel your pelvis rolling over your thigh bones and let your belly relax. Right? The only time, maybe not the only time, one of the times that you might keep a little bit of abdominal engagement is if you've got some pretty substantial lower back pain. But if you can, let the belly relax and actually feel like you're engaging your spine actively to make this shape. And then next time you exhale, go ahead, round your back. This might feel a little sticky. So you just go slow and see if you can feel your glutes, your buttock muscles engage down towards your knees and feel your abdominals pulling your pubic bone up towards your belly button. So again, we're active here. We're not just pushing the limbs down to create the shape. You're using your torso's muscles. And then again, come into your cow spine. And then exhale, cat spine. So rounding and arching. You can stay as long as you want to in one or two of the positions, right? You might take 3 or 4 breaths in cat, 3 or 4 breaths in cow. You might find that just inhaling into one, exhaling into the other just nudges things a little bit more gently, right? So you kind of just follow what your body is asking. And that might change from day to day, and that's fine. Next time you come into cow spine, pause. You're looking forward. Walk your hands a step forward. We're going to come into a short downward dog. So if you've taken classes with me before, you'll know that normally I set down dog up from a plank, but we're going to do a short down dog. So your hands don't need to be that much farther forward than your shoulders. You're going to tuck your toes, lift your hips, come upside down, and we're going to keep your knees very bent in this downward facing dog. Now, with the downward facing dog being shorter, we're not battling sliding as much as if you're in a true long down dog. And so this should be a little bit easier to maintain. And that way we don't have to worry about as much strength as we're really just looking for to get the backs of the legs opened up a little bit more. And so go ahead and see if you can see your feet to make sure that the feet look parallel. You're not turning in or out at all. And then start to try to sink your right heel towards the ground. The knee may or may not straighten. That's totally fine. But just kind of sink the heel towards the ground and lift your left heel up as high as it can go so that you're stretching the toes on your left foot. So you got that kind of bendability where your toes meet the ball of the foot. And so you're pushing that left heel up as you're sinking your right heel down. So just take a moment or two there, trying to breathe as best you can. Let your head drop towards the floor. And it's important to hold some of these things to let the muscles open, but also to let that fascial plane open in the back of the leg. You might find that you need more time than even I'm providing for some of these things. And so, you take that time. And then we're going to slowly switch. So you're going to start to sink your left heel down. Again, the knee doesn't need to straighten. More important is kind of trying to get the front of the ankle to bend. And then you're going to lift your right heel up to start to stretch the toes of your right foot. At any point in time, if you need a break, come down into child's pose. We're going to get there eventually, but first we're going to stretch out this right foot. And then over time, you might be able to start to straighten the left knee a little bit more. But again, the goal is not the knee straightening, but really the heel getting towards the floor. It's called your soleus. It's a deep calf muscle as opposed to the outer calf muscle. And we're going to get to a hamstring stretch, so I'm not really concerned about that. But right now, I'm just trying to get that heel towards the floor. Okay, great. And then go ahead, come back to kind of a gentle knee bending downward dog. Take 2 more breaths right here. And notice what you feel. Can you relax the head a little bit more? Are you feeling any kind of fatigue anywhere? And then we're going to come down into child's pose. So knees come down, wider than the hips, toes together. Sit the hips back. See if you can bring the forehead all the way onto the floor. And in this child's pose, just first, what feels stretchy, or maybe you don't feel a lot of stretch. Is there any pinching in the hips or the knees? Or is there an ability to fold? And that's in child's pose. The aim of how I like to think about child's pose is it's teaching the knees and the hips how to fold deeply, right? But that's not easy for everybody. And particularly if there is hip stickiness, this can be quite pinchy. And so you can always lift your hips up a little bit and get out of that pinchingness. Then we're going to take this child's pose into a side bend. So you're going to walk your hands over to the right, reach, especially the left hand, as far away from your shoulder as possible. And you can place your chest on top of your right thigh if you would like to kind of get a little bit more over into that side bend to stretch open the left ribs. Let's take a couple moments here. And you could very easily hang out in this child's pose in the side bend for, 10, 15, 20 breaths. We're not going to stay quite that long, but all of these poses are really nice to kind of linger in once you get the sequence down, right? I highly recommend kind of learning the sequence and then following your body's needs as opposed to what I'm teaching in terms of time, right? And then go ahead, come all the way over to the other side. So you're going to go through center, over to the left. Right arm reaches forward, head comes towards the ground. It may or may not be on the ground depending on a multitude of factors, so don't worry about that. But what we're really looking for is, can you find some sensation of opening along your outer right armpit or the ribs or the waist, somewhere along that line? And then we breathe. And then we're going to do one more thing in child's pose. So this is a little bit more twisty. And so this can be done on your hands and knees. We're going to thread the needle. So I'll show it in child's pose and on hands and knees just so you have options. So if you're going into child's pose, your knees stay wide, toes stay together. Take your left arm, thread it underneath your right arm, and then you're going to try to slide your left shoulder down onto the ground. Head goes down onto the ground, and then the right arm reaches up and over. So that's option child's pose. If that feels not comfortable or not doable, come onto hands and knees, and then same thing. Left arm goes behind the right arm. This time the elbow of your right hand bends so that you can get the head down on the ground, hopefully. And then if you need support, if you got any neck stuff, keep your right hand flat on the ground in front of your face. If you feel comfortable, you could slide the right hand overhead and try to twist open more to the right if that feels okay in your head, right? Very personal, depending on what you've got going on in terms of neck mobility and tightness, right? So again, your hand can stay in front of your face for more support, or it can reach overhead for more twist. If you're in child's pose, your hand could be in front of your face, I suppose, but you're pretty well seated, so there should not be a lot of pressure on the head whatsoever. Right, a couple more breaths right there. And then we're going to go to the other side. So you're going to unwind your left arm, rewind your right arm right through. Again, this can be done on hands and knees, right? Or in child's pose. Head comes down to the floor. And you're just trying to twist, particularly your upper back. So because we've got the knees on the ground, it helps fix the pelvis a little bit. So you're not twisting as much from your low back and your head, sort of, but we're really trying to get a little bit of that twist going into your thoracic or your mid back where so many of us get stuck. And so this can be really helpful to allow a little bit more breathing after you come out of the twist, allow just a little bit more mobility, and to also remind the body that compression and twisting can feel kind of nice, right? We don't always have to lengthen. Sometimes we need to compress and rotate. All right, and then go ahead, come on out. You're gonna come back onto hands and knees, and then we're gonna come into a standing forward bend. So it's a very similar transition as you did in down dog. Tuck the toes, lift the hips, keep the knees very bent, and then walk your hands back toward your feet. Now, for some of you, you may not be able to have your fingertips on the floor. That's okay. You could get yoga blocks if you want. You could also just keep the knees bent enough that your belly can be on your thighs, and you could just hang on your thighs, right? We're not going for straight legs whatsoever. We're really going for bent knees. If you can bring your hands onto the floor, that's great. You can have them kind of right in front of your feet. And then hopefully that gives your head the safety or the feeling of safety to drop fully down towards the floor. So we're in a very like crouchy position. And then we're going to hang here for a moment. You may or likely will be feeling some sort of sensation along the backs of the thighs, right in your hamstring region. You may also feel a little bit in your calves. That's fine. If you are someone who has the mobility to start lengthening the legs a little bit, that's great. You can go for that if that feels kind of up your alley. But what we're looking for here is not so much of a stretch along the hamstrings as a pouring of the spine and a relaxing of the head, right? And so you might even need to just turn the head really gently from right to left a couple times, bob it forward and back a couple times, and see if you can drop your head even a little bit more. Now, you're going to walk your hands over to the right, or you're going to kind of swing your torso over to the right if your fingers aren't on the ground. And just kind of see what it would feel like to kind of rotate your torso onto that right thigh. Just a couple of breaths here. Make sure that you're not kind of peeling your right foot off the floor. Make sure that that right big toe is down. Take a couple moments here. You might feel a kind of an interesting change in the backs of your legs or in the side body. And then we're just going to go all the way to the other side. So you kind of swing over to the left. Knowing that you can do a forward bend, not just straight forward, but also side bending. And then come back to center. Bend the knees very generously. We want them to be kind of bouncy almost. And then you're going to roll on up to stand. So very gently peeling your spine into a vertical position. Your head is last, right? It should feel kind of heavy. And you might be a smidge lightheaded as you come up. So let your eyes be nice and soft. Try not to lock your knees out too much, but have strength in your legs. And then allow your eyes to focus slightly below the horizon, right? Our eyes naturally are at ease about 15 degrees least 15 degrees below straight out, right? And so let your eyes be a little bit downcast, a little bit soft. Let your shoulders just relax on top of your rib cage. And there you go.